The stagecoach lurched to a stop in Eagle Pass, Texas, and Beatrice Thompson knew this was where her dreams would either take root or die completely in the dust of 1876. She pressed her face against the small window, her round cheeks squishing against the glass as she tried to get a glimpse of the man who had agreed to marry her through correspondence. Her heart hammered beneath the layers of fabric that strained across her chest, and she felt the familiar shame creeping up her neck like poison ivy. At 23 years old and weighing nearly 300 pounds, she had resigned herself to spinsterhood back in St. Louis until the advertisement had appeared in the newspaper, requesting a bride willing to relocate to the Texas frontier. The man had written beautiful letters, never once asking what she looked like, focusing instead on her love of books and her skill with numbers. She had been honest in her final letter, telling him plainly about her size, about how she had been rejected by every man who had ever looked at her, about how she feared dying alone and unwanted. His response had been simple: "Come to Eagle Pass. We will figure everything out together." The driver opened the door, and Beatrice took a deep breath, gathering her skirts and attempting to maneuver her body through the narrow opening. She heard the creak of the wood, felt the coach shift under her weight, and wanted to disappear into the floorboards. The late afternoon sun beat down mercilessly as she finally emerged, her dress already clinging to her damp skin. Eagle Pass was a collection of wooden buildings lining a wide dirt street, with mountains visible in the distance and the Rio Grande snaking somewhere beyond the town's edge. It was wilder and more desolate than she had imagined, and for a moment, panic seized her chest. "Miss Thompson," a voice called out, and Beatrice turned to see a man approaching from the general store. He was tall and lean, with dark hair and a neatly trimmed beard, dressed in a clean shirt and vest despite the heat. His eyes were kind, and he held his hat in his hands respectfully. This was Arthur Prescott, she realized, the man whose letters had given her hope. "Mr. Prescott," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. She watched his face carefully, waiting for the inevitable flicker of disgust, the tightening around the eyes, the forced smile that would tell her he was already regretting his decision. Arthur stepped closer, and his expression remained open and warm. "Welcome to Eagle Pass, Miss Thompson. I hope your journey was not too difficult." "It was long," she admitted, still searching his face for any sign of rejection. "I appreciate you meeting me." "Of course," he said, reaching for her bag. "The boarding house is just down the street. Mrs. Martinez has prepared a room for you. I thought you might want to rest and freshen up before we talked about arrangements." Beatrice nodded, relief flooding through her. At least he was not sending her back immediately. They walked slowly down the dusty street, and she felt the eyes of the town upon her. Women paused in their conversations to stare. Men looked up from loading wagons. Children pointed until their mothers shushed them. Each glance felt like a physical blow, confirming what she had always known about herself. She was too big, too ungainly, too much. Arthur seemed to sense her discomfort. "Eagle Pass is small," he said conversationally. "Most folks here are good people, but they can be curious about newcomers. It will pass once they get used to seeing you around." "I doubt that," Beatrice muttered, then immediately regretted her bitterness. Arthur had been nothing but kind so far. He glanced at her, and something in his expression shifted. "May I speak plainly, Miss Thompson?" "Please do," she said, bracing herself. "I am not a man who judges based on appearances," he said quietly. "I have learned that what matters most cannot be seen with the eyes. Your letters showed me a woman of intelligence, kindness, and courage. Those are the qualities I value. Everything else is just window dressing." Tears pricked at Beatrice's eyes, but she blinked them back. "You say that now, Mr. Prescott, but I have heard such words before. Men claim to see beyond the surface until they actually have to be seen with me in public, until their friends make jokes, until they realize what they have committed to. Arthur stopped walking and turned to face her fully. The boarding house was just ahead, but he did not seem in a hurry. I understand your hesitation, and I do not expect you to trust me immediately. Trust must be earned. But I would like the chance to prove myself to you. I would like us to spend time together to see if we suit each other beyond our letters. There is no rush for a wedding. Take all the time you need. Beatrice studied him, this man who seemed too good to be true. Why did you advertise for a bride? A man like you could surely find a wife here. A shadow passed over Arthur's face. I was engaged once 3 years ago. Her name was Charlotte. She died of cholera 2 weeks before our wedding. After that, I could not bring myself to court anyone in town. Everyone here knew her, knew us together. Every woman I met was measured against her memory. I wanted a fresh start, someone who did not know my history, someone I could build something new with. I am sorry for your loss, Beatrice said softly, and she meant it. She recognized grief when she saw it, even old grief that had been carefully tucked away. Thank you, Arthur said. Now let us get you settled. Mrs. Martinez is an excellent cook, and I am sure you are hungry after your journey. The boarding house was a 2-story structure with a wide porch. Mrs. Martinez turned out to be a plump Mexican woman in her 50s with a warm smile and rapid-fire Spanish that occasionally slipped into her English. She showed Beatrice to a clean room on the 2nd floor with a window overlooking the street. There was a bed, a washstand, a small table, and a chair. It was simple but comfortable. You need anything, you come tell me, Mrs. Martinez said, patting Beatrice's arm. Mr. Arthur, he is good man. You be happy here, I think, after Mrs. Martinez left. Beatrice sank onto the bed, which groaned under her weight. She stared at her reflection in the small mirror above the washstand. Her face was round and flushed from the heat, her brown hair coming loose from its pins, her gray eyes red-rimmed from holding back tears. She looked exactly like what she was, a desperate woman who had traveled halfway across the country to marry a stranger because no one else would have her. But Arthur had not looked at her with disgust. He had not made excuses or tried to backtrack on his proposal. He had asked for time, which was more than fair. Perhaps, just perhaps, there was a chance for happiness here. She was afraid to hope, but hope flickered in her chest anyway, fragile as candlelight. That evening, Arthur invited her to dinner at the town's only restaurant, a modest establishment run by a German couple. Beatrice changed into her best dress, though best was relative when one had to have all their clothes specially made. She had learned to sew out of necessity, unable to afford a dressmaker who charged extra for the additional fabric her body required. The dress was a deep blue cotton with a high collar and long sleeves, practical and plain. Arthur was waiting outside the boarding house, and he offered his arm as they walked. Beatrice hesitated before taking it, unused to such courtesies. Inside the restaurant, she felt the stares again, but Arthur seemed oblivious or simply did not care. He held her chair for her and took the seat across from her with an easy smile. "Tell me about St. Louis," he said after they had ordered. "Your letters mentioned you worked as a bookkeeper." "I did, for a textile merchant," Beatrice said, relaxing slightly as the conversation turned to familiar territory. "I have always had a facility with numbers. My father was an accountant, and he taught me from a young age. It was one of the few respectable occupations available to me." "One of the few?" Arthur asked, raising an eyebrow. Beatrice felt heat rise to her face. "You must know that women of my size are not exactly sought after for most positions. I was lucky that Mr. Brennan cared more about accurate ledgers than appearances. But even he never let me interact with customers. I worked in a back room out of sight. Arthur's jaw tightened. That is their loss and their foolishness. Perhaps, Beatrice said, not entirely convinced. What about you, Mr. Prescott? Your letters mention you have a ranch. Please call me Arthur. And yes, I have a cattle ranch about 5 miles outside of town. It is not large, but it is mine. I have 20 head of cattle, a few horses, and a decent piece of land with access to water. I make enough to live comfortably, and I hope to expand over time. That sounds wonderful, Beatrice said, and she meant it. The idea of land, of space, of being away from the judgmental eyes of town appealed to her greatly. Do you manage it alone? I have 2 ranch hands who help, Miguel and his son Carlos. Good men, hard workers. The ranch house itself is small, just 3 rooms, but it is sturdy and well built. I constructed most of it myself. Their food arrived, simple but hearty fare, and they continued to talk. Arthur asked about her interests, her favorite books, her thoughts on everything from politics to poetry. He listened intently when she spoke, not just waiting for his turn to talk, but genuinely engaging with her words. It was intoxicating, this feeling of being heard, of being valued for her mind. By the time they finished eating, Beatrice felt more comfortable than she had in months, maybe years. As they walked back to the boarding house under a sky full of stars, Arthur said, I would like to show you the ranch tomorrow if you are willing. I want you to see what life would be like here before you make any decisions. I would like that, Beatrice said. Then, gathering her courage, she added, Arthur, I must ask you something. You have been nothing but kind to me, but I need to know. Does my size truly not bother you? I have to know the truth. Arthur stopped and turned to face her, his expression serious in the moonlight. Beatrice, I will be honest with you. When I first saw you step off that stagecoach, I was surprised. You are a larger woman than I had pictured in my mind. But do you know what else I saw? I saw a woman who held her head high despite being afraid. I saw courage and dignity. I saw the person who wrote me those beautiful letters about the books she loved and the dreams she had. Your size is simply part of who you are, like my height or the color of my eyes. It does not define you, and it does not make you any less worthy of love and respect. Beatrice felt tears spill down her cheeks, and she did not bother to wipe them away. I have never heard anyone speak to me like that before. Then the people in your life have failed you, Arthur said gently, and I am sorry for that. But you are here now, in Eagle Pass, and I promise you this. For as long as you will let me, I will see you as you truly are. Not your size, not what others think you should be, but the real Beatrice. The woman who is brave enough to start over in a wild place. The woman who deserves to be cherished. You barely know me, Beatrice whispered. Then let us get to know each other, Arthur said. No pressure, no expectations. Just 2 people learning if they can build a life together. What do you say? Beatrice looked into his kind eyes and felt something shift in her chest, some hard knot of pain and loneliness beginning to loosen. Yes, she said. I would like that very much. The next morning, Arthur arrived with a wagon rather than horses, and Beatrice was grateful for his thoughtfulness. She was not sure she could manage riding horseback, and the wagon provided a more comfortable way to travel. The road out to the ranch was rough, cutting through scrubland dotted with mesquite and prickly pear. The landscape was harsh and beautiful in its own way, so different from the green hills of Missouri. Arthur talked as he drove, pointing out landmarks and explaining the challenges of ranching in this climate. Water is always the main concern, he said. We are fortunate to have a creek that runs through the property, fed by springs in the hills. It is why I chose this land. Without reliable water, you cannot survive out here. The ranch house came into view, a low adobe structure with a covered porch and a barn nearby. It was simple and weathered but had a certain charm. Arthur helped Beatrice down from the wagon, and she felt the heat radiating off the earth beneath her feet. It was hotter than in town, with less shade and no breeze. "Come inside," Arthur said. "It is cooler in the house. The adobe keeps out the worst of the heat." He was right. The interior of the house was dim and noticeably cooler. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a large fireplace on one wall and a table with 4 chairs. There were 2 doors leading to what Beatrice assumed were bedrooms. Everything was clean and well-maintained, though clearly lacking a woman's touch. The shelves were mostly empty, and there were no curtains on the windows. "It is not much," Arthur said, a hint of uncertainty in his voice. "But it could be a home with the right person to help make it one." Beatrice walked slowly around the room, running her fingers over the smooth adobe walls. She could picture it, she realized. Curtains in the windows, herbs drying from the rafters, maybe a rocking chair by the fireplace. It would take work, but it could be cozy and welcoming. "I think it has good bones," she said. "It just needs some life breathed into it." Arthur's face lit up. "Exactly what I have been thinking. Come, let me show you the rest." He showed her the 2 bedrooms, both small but adequate, and then took her outside to see the barn and the livestock. Miguel and Carlos were working near the barn, and Arthur introduced them. Both men were polite, though Carlos, who looked to be in his late teens, could not quite hide his surprise at Beatrice's size. Miguel elbowed his son sharply and greeted her in accented English. "Miss Beatrice, it is good to meet you. Mr. Arthur, he talk about you much. We are happy you are here." "Thank you," Beatrice said, touched by the warmth in his voice. They spent the rest of the morning walking around the property. Arthur showed her the creek, which was more of a stream really, but clear and cool. He showed her where he planned to expand the herd, where he wanted to build a larger barn, all the dreams he had for the future. And slowly, Beatrice began to see herself in that future. She began to imagine waking up in that little adobe house, cooking breakfast in that kitchen, keeping the books for the ranch. By midday, the heat was becoming oppressive, and they retreated to the shade of the porch. Arthur had brought a basket of food from Mrs. Martinez, and they ate bread and cheese and drank cool water from the creek. Beatrice felt sweat trickling down her back, plastering her dress to her skin, but Arthur looked just as uncomfortable in the heat, and somehow that made her feel less self-conscious. "Can you see yourself being happy here?" Arthur asked quietly. "I know it is isolated and the work is hard. It is not an easy life I am offering." Beatrice considered the question carefully. "I think I could be happy here," she said slowly. "But Arthur, I need you to understand something. I am not built for hard physical labor. I can manage a house. I can cook and clean and keep your books, but I cannot work cattle or haul heavy loads. My body simply will not allow it." "I would never expect that of you," Arthur said firmly. "I have Miguel and Carlos for the ranch work. What I need is a partner, someone to manage the household and help me plan for the future, someone to talk to at the end of a long day, someone to build a life with. That is what I am asking for, nothing more." "Then yes," Beatrice said, feeling a surge of courage. "I can see myself being happy here, with you." Arthur's smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. "Then let us make it official. I would like to marry you, Beatrice Thompson, not next month or next year, but soon as you feel ready. I do not want you to feel like you are in limbo, staying at the boarding house and wondering what will happen. I want you to be my wife, if you will have me." Beatrice's heart raced. This was happening so fast, and yet it felt right in a way nothing else in her life ever had. "I will have you, Arthur Prescott. I will marry you." They were married 3 days later by the town minister, with Mrs. Martinez and her husband standing as witnesses. Beatrice wore the same blue dress she had worn to dinner that first night, and Arthur wore his Sunday best. The ceremony was simple and short, but when Arthur slipped a gold band onto her finger and said his vows, Beatrice felt tears streaming down her face. They were not tears of sadness or fear, but of relief and gratitude and something that might have been joy. "You will live loved beyond measure with me," Arthur said softly, adding his own words to the traditional vows. "I promise you this, Beatrice. You will never again doubt that you are wanted and cherished." "I believe you," Beatrice whispered back, and she did. The wedding night was something Beatrice had dreaded since agreeing to this arrangement. She had no experience with men, and her size made her feel grotesque and undesirable. But Arthur was patient and gentle, taking his time, making sure she was comfortable. He lit candles instead of lamps, casting softer light, and he touched her like she was precious, like her body was something to be admired rather than hidden away. When he kissed her, she felt beautiful for the first time in her life. When he held her afterward, his arms strong and sure around her, she felt safe. "Thank you," she whispered into the darkness. "For what?" Arthur asked, his breath warm against her hair. "For making me feel like I matter, like I am worth something." Arthur tightened his hold on her. "Beatrice, you matter more than you know, and I will spend every day proving it to you." Life on the ranch settled into a rhythm over the following weeks. Beatrice woke early with Arthur, made breakfast for him and the ranch hands, and then spent her mornings managing the household. She cleaned and organized, sewed curtains from fabric Arthur bought in town, and began planting a small kitchen garden near the house. In the afternoons, she worked on the ranch books, organizing Arthur's haphazard record-keeping into a proper system. She discovered he had been underpaying himself and overextending credit to neighbors who never paid him back. Within a month, she had reorganized their finances and identified ways to increase their income. Arthur was impressed and grateful. "I knew you were talented with numbers, but I had no idea how much I was losing through poor management. You have already more than earned your keep." "I am your wife, Arthur, not a hired hand," Beatrice said, though she was pleased by his praise. "We are partners in this." "Partners," Arthur agreed, pulling her close for a kiss. "I like the sound of that." But life in Eagle Pass was not without its challenges. The other ranchers' wives were slow to accept Beatrice, and she often felt their judgment when she went to town. They would smile politely but never quite meet her eyes, never invited her to their sewing circles or church socials. Only Mrs. Martinez remained a steadfast friend, always welcoming her warmly and defending her against whispered gossip. One afternoon, about 6 weeks after the wedding, Beatrice overheard two women talking outside the general store. She had just entered and was about to make her presence known when she heard her name. "I still cannot believe Arthur married that woman," one voice said. "She is enormous. How does she even manage on a ranch? I heard she just sits inside all day while he does all the work," the other voice replied. "Poor Arthur. He must regret answering that advertisement. He could have had his pick of women. She must have tricked him somehow, made him think she was something she is not. Men can be so foolish when it comes to women." Beatrice stood frozen, the familiar shame washing over her. She wanted to leave, to run back to the ranch and hide, but she forced herself to walk forward. The two women, both ranchers' wives she vaguely recognized, turned and saw her. Their faces flushed with embarrassment, but neither apologized. "Excuse me," Beatrice said quietly, moving past them to the counter. She completed her purchases quickly and left, her hands shaking as she loaded the supplies into the wagon. By the time she got back to the ranch, tears were streaming down her face. Arthur found her in the bedroom, sitting on the edge of the bed and crying. "Beatrice, what is wrong? What happened?" She told him haltingly about the women in the store. "They think I tricked you. They think you regret marrying me, and maybe they are right. Maybe you would have been better off with someone else, someone who does not embarrass you." Arthur knelt in front of her, taking her hands in his. His face was flushed with anger, but his voice was gentle. "Listen to me very carefully, Beatrice. I do not give a damn what those women think. I do not regret marrying you for even 1 second. You are the best thing that has ever happened to me. You have made this house a home. You have saved me money and helped me plan for the future. You have given me someone to talk to and laugh with. You have given me love. Those women are small-minded and cruel, and their opinions mean nothing. But you hear what they say. You know how people look at us." "I know, and it makes me furious. But not at you, Beatrice. Never at you. I am angry at people who judge others based on appearances. I am angry at a world that made you believe you are anything less than extraordinary, but I will not let their ignorance poison what we have built together. Please do not let them do that either." Beatrice looked into his eyes and saw the truth there. He meant every word. She took a shaky breath and nodded. "I will try. It is just hard. I have dealt with this my entire life, and I thought maybe here with you it would be different. It is different because you have me on your side now, and anyone who wants to hurt you will have to go through me first." The conviction in his voice made her believe him. She leaned forward and kissed him, pouring all her gratitude and love into it. "Thank you for fighting for me." "Always," Arthur promised. True to his word, Arthur made his feelings known in town. When he heard gossip about Beatrice, he confronted it directly. When women made snide comments, he defended her publicly. It was uncomfortable and caused some tension with neighbors, but Arthur never wavered. And slowly, very slowly, some people began to come around. Mrs. Martinez helped, talking up Beatrice's skills and kindness to anyone who would listen. Miguel and Carlos spoke highly of her when they were in town. Even the minister, who had been impressed by Beatrice's knowledge of Scripture, mentioned her favorably. By the fall, things had improved. A few of the younger wives, perhaps less set in their judgmental ways, began to include Beatrice in occasional gatherings. It was not full acceptance, but it was something. Beatrice tried to be gracious and friendly, though she remained guarded, always waiting for the other shoe to drop. The ranch was doing well. Arthur's herd had grown, and he had negotiated a good price for cattle sold to a buyer passing through on his way to New Mexico. Beatrice's management of their finances meant they had savings for the first time, a cushion against bad years. They were talking about building an addition to the house, maybe adding a proper parlor and another bedroom for the children they hoped to have someday. One evening in late October, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Arthur said, "I have been thinking about something." "What is that?" Beatrice asked, leaning against his shoulder. "I want to take you on a trip. There is a territorial fair in San Antonio in a few weeks. I thought we could go, spend a few days in the city, see the sights. You have been working so hard and you deserve a break. We both do." Beatrice felt a flutter of excitement mixed with anxiety. "San Antonio, that is a long journey. About a week by wagon, but we can take our time. We will stop in small towns along the way, see parts of Texas you have not visited yet. What do you say?" The old Beatrice, the one who had stepped off the stagecoach in Eagle Pass 5 months ago, would have been terrified. But she was not that woman anymore, not entirely. She had a husband who loved her, a home she had helped build, and a growing sense of her own worth. "Yes," she said. "I would love to go." They set out on a cool November morning, the wagon packed with supplies for the journey. Miguel and Carlos would look after the ranch while they were gone. The first few days of travel were pleasant, the autumn weather mild and the roads relatively good. They stopped in small towns, sleeping in boarding houses and eating in local restaurants. Beatrice still felt the stares, still noticed the whispers, but with Arthur by her side, it was easier to bear. He never acted ashamed of her, always held her hand in public, always introduced her proudly as his wife. In one small town, they attended a Sunday church service. Afterward, an older woman approached them. She was plump herself, with kind eyes and a warm smile. "You two are newlyweds, are you not?" "I can always tell, you have that look about you." "We have been married about 5 months," Arthur confirmed. "Wonderful. Marriage is a blessing, especially when you find the right partner. My husband and I have been married 42 years, and I can tell you it is worth every challenge." She looked directly at Beatrice. "Do not let anyone make you feel less than, dear. I was a large woman when I married, and I heard all the cruel comments. But my Henry loved me just as I was, and we built a beautiful life together. You have that same look about your husband. He is a good man. Hold on to him." "I intend to," Beatrice said, her voice thick with emotion. After the woman left, Arthur squeezed Beatrice's hand. "See, we are not alone. There are good people in this world." San Antonio was overwhelming and exciting in equal measure. It was much larger than Eagle Pass, with tall buildings and bustling streets. The territorial fair was a spectacle of livestock, crafts, and entertainment. They wandered through exhibits, watched horse races, and ate foods Beatrice had never tried before. Arthur bought her a beautiful shawl from a Mexican vendor, the wool soft and dyed in rich colors. They stayed in a proper hotel, and Arthur insisted on taking her to a fancy restaurant one evening, where they ate steak and potatoes and drank wine. "This is wonderful," Beatrice said, looking around at the elegantly dressed diners, "though I admit I feel rather out of place." "You belong anywhere I belong," Arthur said, "and I think you look beautiful tonight." Beatrice glanced down at her dress, another one she had made herself. It was nicer than her everyday clothes, made of deep green fabric with black trim, but she knew it could not compare to the fashionable gowns worn by other women in the restaurant. "You are biased." "I am honest," Arthur corrected. "Beatrice, when are you going to start seeing yourself the way I see you?" "I am trying," she said softly. "Truly I am. It is just hard to undo a lifetime of believing something different, I know. But I will keep telling you until you believe it. You are beautiful. You are smart. You are worthy of love and respect, and I am the luckiest man in Texas to have you as my wife." Beatrice reached across the table and took his hand. "I love you, Arthur. I do not think I have said that enough, but I do. I love you more than I ever thought I could love anyone." Arthur's eyes shone with emotion. "I love you too, Beatrice, more than words can say." The trip home was slower, both of them reluctant to leave the magic of those days behind. But as the ranch came into view, Beatrice felt a surge of happiness. This was home now, truly home. Not just a place she lived, but a place she belonged. Winter came to Eagle Pass, bringing cooler temperatures and occasional rain. Beatrice settled into a comfortable routine, and her friendship with Mrs. Martinez deepened. The older woman taught her how to make tamales and enchiladas, and Beatrice shared her recipes for pies and bread. They spent many afternoons together, cooking and talking about everything from recipes to religion to the challenges of married life. "You have been good for Mr. Arthur," Mrs. Martinez said one day. "When I first meet him after his first love died, he was so sad, like a ghost just going through the motions. But now he is alive again. You did that." "He did the same for me," Beatrice admitted. "I was just existing before, not really living. I thought I would spend my whole life alone, unwanted. Arthur changed everything." "That is what love does," Mrs. Martinez said wisely. "It changes us, makes us better." In February, Beatrice realized her monthly courses had not come. She waited another few weeks, afraid to hope, before finally confiding in Mrs. Martinez. The older woman's face lit up. You are with child. This is wonderful news. I think so, but I am not certain, and I am afraid to tell Arthur until I am sure. You must tell him. He will be so happy. And you must see the doctor, make sure everything is well. The doctor in Eagle Pass confirmed what Beatrice suspected. She was pregnant, about 3 months along. He examined her carefully and expressed some concern about her weight. You will need to be careful, Mrs. Prescott. Pregnancy can be more challenging for women of your size. You must not gain too much weight, and you must get moderate exercise. But many large women have healthy babies. We will just need to monitor you closely. Beatrice agreed to follow his instructions, though his words had stirred up old fears. What if something went wrong? What if her body could not do this? She pushed the worries aside and focused on telling Arthur the news. She waited until evening when they were alone on the porch watching the stars. Arthur, I have something to tell you. He turned to her, instantly alert. What is it? Is something wrong? No, nothing is wrong, at least I hope not. Arthur, I am pregnant. We are going to have a baby. For a moment, Arthur just stared at her. Then his face broke into the widest smile she had ever seen. He let out a whoop of joy and pulled her into his arms, lifting her off her feet despite her size. We are having a baby, really. Beatrice, that is the best news I have ever heard, she laughed, tears of happiness streaming down her face. Yes, really. The doctor confirmed it today. The baby should come in late summer. Arthur set her down gently as if suddenly afraid he might hurt her. Are you feeling well? Do you need anything? Should you be sitting down? Arthur, I am fine. I am pregnant, not ill. But yes, we will need to prepare. We need to build a cradle, get baby clothes, set up a nursery. We will do all of that and more. Oh, Beatrice, I cannot believe it. We are going to be parents. The joy in his voice made her own fears seem small and manageable. Together, they could handle whatever challenges came. They spent the rest of the evening talking about names and plans, dreaming about the future. The pregnancy progressed well through the spring. Beatrice felt tired and sometimes nauseous, but nothing worse than other women had described. She continued to manage the household and the books, though Arthur insisted she take frequent rests. He was almost comically protective, constantly worrying that she was doing too much or not eating enough or spending too long on her feet. It was annoying and endearing in equal measure. In May, Beatrice felt the baby move for the first time, a flutter like butterfly wings against the inside of her belly. She was sitting at the kitchen table working on the accounts when it happened, and she gasped with surprise and wonder. By June, the movements were stronger and more frequent, and Arthur loved to place his hand on her stomach and feel the baby kick. Strong one, this baby, he said one evening. Takes after the mother, or the father, Beatrice countered. You are not exactly a weakling, Arthur Prescott. True, but you are the strongest person I know, not in body but in spirit. You have survived things that would have broken many people, and you are still here, still fighting, still loving. That is true strength. Beatrice felt tears well up, pregnancy making her even more emotional than usual. How do you always know exactly what to say? Practice, Arthur said with a grin. And the fact that I mean every word. As summer arrived and her due date approached, Beatrice became increasingly nervous. The doctor had continued to monitor her, and while he said everything seemed to be progressing normally, he also warned that labor could be difficult. Your size will make it harder for me to determine the baby's position, he explained. And you may have more difficulty with the delivery itself. But women have been having babies since the beginning of time. We will get through this. His words were not entirely reassuring, but Beatrice tried to stay positive. Mrs. Martinez had agreed to be present for the birth, along with the doctor, and Arthur had promised to be nearby. Women usually labored alone or with other women, but Arthur had made it clear he was not going anywhere. In late August, on a sweltering afternoon, Beatrice felt the first contraction. It was not painful, just a tightening across her belly that made her pause in her work. She had been baking bread and she set down the dough and waited. 10 minutes later it came again, and then again. This was it. "Arthur," she called out, trying to keep the panic from her voice. He came running from the barn, Miguel right behind him. "What is it? Is it the baby?" "I think so." "The contractions have started." Arthur went pale but nodded firmly. "Miguel, ride to town and get the doctor and Mrs. Martinez. Beatrice, come inside and lie down." "Should you lie down?" "What do you need me to do?" Despite her fear, Beatrice had to smile at his panic. "I need you to breathe and stay calm. This could take many hours. First babies usually do." It took 19 hours. 19 hours of pain that started as manageable and slowly built into waves of agony that left Beatrice gasping and screaming. Mrs. Martinez stayed by her side, wiping her face with cool cloths and murmuring encouragement. The doctor checked on her periodically, his expression growing more concerned as the hours dragged on. And Arthur refused to leave, holding her hand and talking to her through the worst of it. "You can do this," he said over and over. "You are strong, Beatrice. You are the strongest person I know. Just a little longer. I am here. I am not going anywhere." When the baby finally came, just before dawn, it was a boy. He was red-faced and screaming with a full head of dark hair. The doctor checked him over and pronounced him healthy, and Mrs. Martinez wrapped him in a blanket and placed him in Beatrice's arms. "A son," Beatrice whispered, staring down at the tiny face. "We have a son, Arthur." Arthur was crying openly, tears streaming down his face. "He is perfect." "You are perfect. Thank you, Beatrice. Thank you for giving me this gift." They named him Andrew Thomas Prescott, Andrew for Arthur's father and Thomas for Beatrice's. He was a hungry baby, nursing frequently and crying when he was not satisfied quickly enough. Beatrice was exhausted but filled with a fierce love she had never experienced before. This was her son, her child, proof that her body could create something beautiful despite what she had always been told. The first few weeks were hard. Beatrice was recovering from the birth, which had torn her body in ways she had not anticipated. The doctor had stitched her up and given her instructions on how to care for herself, but everything hurt. And Andrew did not sleep more than 2 hours at a time, leaving both parents exhausted and frazzled. But they managed, supporting each other through the difficult moments and celebrating the small victories. By the time fall arrived, life had settled into a new rhythm. Andrew was growing quickly, and Beatrice had mostly healed. Arthur was besotted with his son, spending every free moment holding him or talking to him or just staring at him in wonder. Miguel and Carlos were equally charmed, and little Andrew became the darling of the ranch. Even in town, people's attitudes seemed to soften. There was something about a baby that made people more inclined to be kind, and more than one woman who had previously snubbed Beatrice stopped her to admire Andrew and offer unsolicited advice. Beatrice accepted their attention graciously, though she did not forget their earlier cruelty. But for Arthur and Andrew's sake, she tried to build bridges where she could. One afternoon in October, nearly a year and a half after Beatrice had first arrived in Eagle Pass, she was sitting on the porch with Andrew in her arms when a stagecoach pulled into town. She watched idly as it stopped, wondering who might be arriving. To her surprise, a young woman stepped out, looking around nervously. She was thin and plain, with mousy hair and a worn dress. She clutched a small bag and seemed overwhelmed by her surroundings. Something about the woman's expression, the fear and hope mixed together, was familiar. Beatrice realized with a jolt that she had looked exactly the same when she had arrived. Another mail-order bride, perhaps. The woman caught Beatrice's eye and seemed to draw some courage from seeing another woman. She straightened her shoulders and walked toward the general store. "Good luck," Beatrice whispered, sending up a silent prayer that the woman would find the same happiness Beatrice had found. That evening, she mentioned the woman to Arthur. "I saw a new arrival in town today, a young woman traveling alone. I think she might be a mail-order bride." "Did you speak to her?" "No, but I wish I had. I wish someone had spoken to me when I arrived, told me it would be all right. Maybe I will see her again and introduce myself." Arthur nodded thoughtfully. "That would be kind. You could tell her your story, how things worked out for us. It might give her hope." "Our story did work out well, did it not?" Beatrice said, looking around at the ranch, at her husband, at the baby in her arms. "Sometimes I still cannot believe this is my life." "Believe it," Arthur said, pulling her close. "This is your life, our life. And it is only going to get better." And it did. As the years passed, the ranch prospered. Arthur expanded the herd and bought more land. Beatrice continued to manage the finances, proving herself invaluable to the operation. They added on to the house, building the parlor they had dreamed of and 2 more bedrooms. Andrew grew into a bright, active boy who loved the ranch and followed his father everywhere. When Andrew was 3, Beatrice became pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, perhaps because she knew what to expect. She gave birth to a daughter in the spring of 1880, a tiny girl with blonde hair and gray eyes. They named her Margaret, after Arthur's mother, and called her Maggie. Where Andrew was loud and boisterous, Maggie was quiet and observant, and Beatrice saw something of herself in her daughter. 2 years later, another son arrived, Samuel. And 3 years after that, a second daughter, Rose. The house that had once seemed so empty was now filled with noise and laughter and love. Beatrice marveled at the life she had built, so different from anything she had imagined back in St. Louis. The children never seemed to notice or care about their mother's size. To them, she was just Mama, the person who kissed their scrapes and told them stories and made the best apple pie in Texas. And when other children made comments, which happened occasionally, the Prescott children defended their mother fiercely. Andrew once got into a fight at school when another boy called Beatrice fat, and he came home with a black eye and no regrets. "Nobody talks about my mama like that," he said stubbornly when Arthur tried to lecture him about fighting. Arthur struggled to keep a straight face. "While I appreciate you defending your mother, fighting is not the answer, son. You need to use your words." "I did use words. He did not listen, so I used my fists." Beatrice hid her smile behind her hand. Her son had his father's sense of justice and his mother's stubbornness. It was a formidable combination. As the children grew, Beatrice became more involved in the community. She taught Sunday school at the church and organized fundraisers for families in need. Her skill with numbers made her valuable, and she helped several struggling ranchers reorganize their finances. People who had once judged her now sought her advice, and while Beatrice did not forget their earlier cruelty, she tried to forgive. "You have become quite the pillar of the community," Arthur teased one evening after she returned from a church meeting. "Remember when you were afraid to even go to town?" "I remember," Beatrice said. "And I remember the man who gave me the courage to try. You changed my life, Arthur Prescott." "We changed each other's lives," Arthur corrected. "I was just going through the motions before you came. You gave me purpose and joy. You gave me a family and a future. I am the one who should be grateful." "Then we are both grateful," Beatrice said, "and both very lucky." In 1885, when Andrew was 9 and Rose was just a baby, Eagle Pass faced a severe drought. The creek on the Prescott ranch dwindled to a trickle, and other ranchers were even worse off. Cattle died, and families struggled. Arthur, on Beatrice's advice, organized a cooperative where ranchers could share resources and help each other through the crisis. It was not a perfect solution, but it helped. Several families survived who might have otherwise lost everything. The experience reinforced what Beatrice had learned over the years. Community mattered, kindness mattered, and people were capable of change and growth. The women who had once mocked her now included her in their circles. The men who had doubted Arthur's choice now respected his wife's intelligence and business sense. It was not that Beatrice's size had changed or that people had stopped noticing it, but they had learned to see beyond it, to value her for her contributions and her character. By the early 1890s, the Prescott Ranch was one of the most successful in the area. Andrew was a teenager, already talking about taking over the ranch someday. Maggie had inherited her mother's love of books and her father's sense of justice, and she talked about becoming a teacher. Samuel was the dreamer of the family, always sketching pictures and making up stories. And Rose, now 7, was the baby who had everyone wrapped around her little finger. Beatrice, now in her early 40s, looked in the mirror and saw a woman she barely recognized from the frightened girl who had stepped off the stagecoach all those years ago. Her face was lined with age and sun, her body even larger after 4 pregnancies, her hair streaked with gray. But her eyes were bright and content. She was loved and she knew it. She had a husband who still looked at her with desire and affection after 16 years of marriage. She had children who adored her. She had a home and a community and a purpose. One evening, as she and Arthur sat on the porch watching the sun set, a familiar ritual after all these years, Arthur said, "Do you ever think about that day you arrived in Eagle Pass? About how different things could have been?" "Sometimes," Beatrice admitted. "I think about how close I came to not answering your advertisement. I almost did not, you know. I was afraid it was too good to be true." "I am glad you took the risk." "So am I. Arthur, do you remember what you said to me on our wedding day about me living loved beyond measure?" "Of course I remember. I meant every word." "I know you did, and you kept that promise. Every single day you have shown me that I am loved and valued. You gave me a life I never dreamed I could have. You gave me everything." Arthur took her hand, the gesture as natural now as breathing. "You gave me just as much, Beatrice. More, maybe. You took a broken man and made him whole again. You built a home and a family. You are the heart of everything we have here. I hope you know that." "I do know it. Finally, after all these years, I really do believe it." They sat in comfortable silence as the sky turned from gold to pink to purple. Somewhere in the house, their children were laughing about something. The cattle lowed in the distance. A breeze carried the scent of sage and mesquite. It was an ordinary evening, nothing special, and yet it was everything. Beatrice thought about the girl she had been, convinced she would die unwanted and alone. She thought about the years of pain and rejection, the belief that her body made her unworthy of love. And she thought about Arthur, the cowboy who had seen past all of that to the woman beneath. He had not just accepted her despite her size. He had loved her completely, body and soul. He had given her the space to grow into herself, to discover her own worth, to become the person she was meant to be. "What are you thinking about?" Arthur asked, noticing her distant expression. "I am thinking about how grateful I am," Beatrice said. "For this life, for you, for everything. I am thinking about how wrong I was all those years ago when I believed I was not worthy of love. I am thinking about how glad I am that you proved me wrong." Arthur lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "You were always worthy, Beatrice. You just needed someone to show you. And you did. You showed me every day. You still do." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Beatrice felt a profound sense of peace. Her life had not been easy, and there had been struggles and sorrows along the way. But she had found love and acceptance in this wild place with this extraordinary man. She had built a family and a home. She had learned to see herself through Arthur's eyes, to understand that her worth was not determined by her size but by her character, her actions, and her heart. The years continued to pass, bringing both joys and sorrows as all years do. Arthur's hair turned silver, and he moved a bit slower than he used to, though he was still strong and capable. Beatrice's body continued to carry the weight it always had, but she no longer felt burdened by it. It was simply part of who she was, no more defining than her brown hair or gray eyes. Andrew grew into a fine young man and eventually took over much of the ranch management. He married a sweet girl from a neighboring ranch, and they gave Beatrice and Arthur their first grandchild, a boy they named Arthur after his grandfather. Maggie did become a teacher, running the small schoolhouse in Eagle Pass and making a real difference in children's lives. Samuel moved to San Antonio to pursue his art, sending home beautiful sketches and paintings that Beatrice treasured. And Rose, the baby, fell in love with a young lawyer and moved to Austin. Though she visited as often as she could through it all, Beatrice and Arthur remained each other's constants. They still sat on the porch every evening, still held hands, still talked about everything and nothing. The love between them had deepened over the years, becoming something richer and more complex than the tentative hope that had brought them together. They had weathered droughts and economic downturns, illnesses and losses, disagreements and challenges. And they had come through it all stronger, more committed, more certain that they had found something precious. On their 20th anniversary, Arthur gave Beatrice a locket with pictures of all 4 children inside. 20 years, he said, the best 20 years of my life. Mine too, Beatrice said, tears streaming down her face. Arthur, I need you to know something. I need you to understand what you did for me. You did not just give me a home or a family, though those things are precious beyond measure. You gave me myself. You taught me that I was worthy of love, that my body did not define my value, that I had contributions to make. You saw me when I could not see myself. And because of you, I learned to see myself differently. That is the greatest gift anyone has ever given me. Arthur pulled her close and she felt his tears dampening her hair. Beatrice, you have always been extraordinary, I just helped you realize it. But the strength and courage and love, that was all you. I am so proud of the woman you are. I am so honored to be your husband. They held each other as the sun set on another day, another year, another chapter of their life together. And Beatrice marveled, as she often did, at the twists of fate that had brought her to Eagle Pass so many years ago. She had been desperate and afraid, convinced that she was making a terrible mistake. She had believed that no man could truly love her, that her size made her unworthy of happiness. But Arthur had proven her wrong in every possible way. He had loved her fiercely and faithfully through all the years and all the changes. He had built a life with her, created a family with her, grown old with her. And in doing so, he had given her the most precious gift imaginable. He had taught her to love herself. As they made their way into the house, Arthur's arm around her waist, Beatrice looked around at the home they had built together. The walls held photographs of their children and grandchildren. The shelves were filled with books and mementos from their years together. The kitchen still smelled faintly of the bread she had baked that morning. This was her kingdom, her sanctuary, her heart made manifest in adobe and wood. And standing beside her, silver-haired and weathered but still the same kind-eyed cowboy who had met her stage coach all those years ago, was Arthur. Her husband, her partner, her greatest blessing. The man who had looked at an obese woman convinced she would die unwanted and said, simply and sincerely, You will live loved beyond measure with me. He had kept that promise. Every single day for 20 years, he had shown her that she was cherished and valued. And she knew, with absolute certainty, that he would continue to keep that promise for all the days they had left together. In the twilight of their years, as the 20th century dawned and brought with it changes neither of them could have imagined, Beatrice and Arthur remained devoted to each other. They watched their grandchildren grow, welcomed great-grandchildren, and continued to be pillars of the Eagle Pass community. Their love story became something of a legend in town, whispered about at church socials and mentioned in marriage sermons. They were proof that love could conquer prejudice, that true partnership could weather any storm, that the measure of a person had nothing to do with the size of their body and everything to do with the size of their heart. When Arthur passed away in 1910 at the age of 68, Beatrice held his hand and whispered the words she had told him countless times over their 34 years together. "Thank you for loving me. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for giving me a life I never dreamed possible." Arthur's last words to her were the same ones he had spoken on their wedding day. "You lived loved beyond measure with me, Beatrice, and I lived loved beyond measure with you." Beatrice lived for another 7 years, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who all adored her. She never remarried, content with the love she had known and the legacy she had built. When she passed in 1917 at the age of 64, she was buried next to Arthur on the ranch they had built together, under the wide Texas sky they had both loved. On her gravestone, placed there by her children, were simple words that captured the essence of her life and her love story. Beatrice Thompson Prescott. Beloved wife, mother, grandmother, and great-grandmother, she lived loved beyond measure, and indeed she had. The frightened girl who had stepped off that stagecoach in 1876, convinced she was unworthy of love, had found everything she had ever dreamed of and more. She had found acceptance, partnership, family, and purpose. Most importantly, she had found a love that transformed her understanding of herself and her place in the world. Arthur's promise to her, spoken on their wedding day, had been more than just words. It had been a commitment, a prophecy, and a gift. He had loved her beyond measure, and in doing so, he had taught her to love herself. Together, they had built something beautiful and enduring, a love that had weathered every storm and emerged stronger for it. Their story became a testament to the power of seeing beyond surface appearances, of valuing character over conventional beauty, of building a partnership based on mutual respect and genuine affection. It was a reminder that everyone, regardless of their size or shape, deserves to be loved fully and completely. And it was proof that sometimes the most unlikely beginnings can lead to the most extraordinary endings. In the years after Beatrice's death, her children and grandchildren often told the story of how their family began. They spoke of the brave woman who traveled alone to Texas, risking everything for a chance at happiness. They talked about the cowboy who saw past prejudice to the person beneath. And they reminded each new generation that the greatest gift you can give someone is to see them truly, to value them completely, and to love them without reservation. The ranch that Beatrice and Arthur built together remained in the family for generations, a living monument to their love and their legacy. And on quiet evenings, when the sun set over the Texas landscape and painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson, it was said that you could still feel their presence there. Two souls who had found each other against all odds, who had built a life of meaning and purpose, and who had loved each other beyond measure until the very end. It was a love story for the ages, set against the wild backdrop of the American West. and at its heart was a simple but profound truth, that every person, regardless of their appearance or their past, deserves to be loved completely. Beatrice Thompson had believed she would die unwanted. Arthur Prescott had promised her she would live loved beyond measure. And together, they had proven that love, true love, can transform lives and create legacies that endure long after the lovers themselves have passed into memory. Their story ended not with sadness but with fulfillment. Every promise made had been kept. Every dream had been realized. Every fear had been overcome. And most importantly, two lonely souls had found in each other the completeness they had been seeking all along. It was a happily ever after in the truest sense, a love that lasted not just until death, but beyond it, living on in the hearts and memories of all those who had been touched by their remarkable journey together.